Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to talk about a constituent of mine, Linda. It's not her real name to protect her identity. We, as members of Parliament, are constantly dealing with people facing different situations. I know I've told my staff the number one priority that I have, that we have is to help our constituents. That's the first thing, whatever they're facing. And so she called my office. She was in distress. Linda was dying of stage 4 cancer. It was all throughout her body, and she was in hospice, and she was distressed. And the reason being is because she was trying to allow her daughter, who was the sole beneficiary, to be able to be a co-signer on one of her accounts. But she had a situation with the manager, the bank manager, who told her that unless she came to the bank, this couldn't be done. And she explained to him that she was unable to walk. She was unable to get out of bed, being in hospice. So she phoned. She was just really shaken up, talked to my staff. And so I phoned the bank manager and got the same response from him, and I was quite surprised. And looked for ways to, how can we push this forward? Talked to other banks. They said yes, they would make ways to be able for her to sign. And so we dealt with had conversations with the bank, the head office. That wasn't going anywhere too fast. Finally talked to their government ombudsperson. And so finally, after many conversations, both by myself, my staff, Linda, a lot of struggles, they made a way for her to be able to sign this form. And it just was a terrible way for her to finish off her life. But she did it because she wanted to make a difference and to obviously help her own family, but also for people in similar ordeal. But she won before she succumbed to cancer. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I believe that in smaller and bigger ways, that right until our very last breath, we can make a positive contribution, we can make a difference for our family and be an inspiration to others. I just think of my father, who died just a few years ago. He was such an example to us as a family. We're with him before he passed in unconsciousness. And he, in spite of his pain, he was thinking about us. He wanted to know how we're doing. He didn't want to talk about himself, wanted to talk about others. It just surprised me, and the fact that he was able to make that difference. And I don't want to come across as judgmental in talking here about moving to assisted suicide, MAID, because I know people. I have extended family that have chosen assisted dying, and before COVID, many of them would have their family to say their last goodbyes. 16,000 people have made this decision, Mr. Speaker. Twice as many people dying through euthanasia than currently die through car accidents. And this is just skyrocketing. I talked to a fellow just a few days ago, a constituent of mine, and he said that he's choosing MAID. That was his plan for down the road. It's very matter of fact, business-like. I don't think he was ill, but it's just like it's becoming normalized in Canadian society. And that's concerning to me, Mr. Speaker. I know that words make a difference, and we don't want to hear the word suicide, but it has been called assisted suicide. And suicide has always been something that has, in our society, has been seen as sad, as disturbing, as tragic. We probably all know people that have committed suicide. I think of my own mother. I think of others. And it's grieving. And I'm concerned about the direction that we are going, that we're making this has become increasingly a benevolent action, not only from seen that way, but even about people themselves not wanting to be a burden on others. And there's other reasons also. When I was a teenager, shortly after a movie came out, it was called Soylent Green, 1973, by the main actors were Charlton Heston and Lee Taylor Young. It was a futuristic movie in New York City, and the setting was about 50 years later, 2022. It's almost upon us. What happened was that New York City was overpopulated, 40 million people in the city, and they were going hungry. And aged people would come into this big room with screens and beautiful images of the earth. And there was lovely music. And after about 20 minutes, they would be euthanized. And I remember, as a teenager, just being shocked. And I just felt this was so deceptive, what was happening, and just how it was glamorized in many ways to deal with the population. So it just goes to show how society has changed over the years. Even the term maid portrays is a personification of a female servant there to help, to assist, harmless. I can think of other images for assisted dying that are much darker. I know that this bill says that it does not apply to people who are struggling with mental illness, but the question is, for how long? Euthanasia advocates keep pushing the courts further and further, and we're looking at it right now, to undermine, to change the criteria, to open it up, make it more, to expand it. This bill repeals the provision that requires a person's natural death to be reasonably foreseeable in order for them to be eligible for medical assistance in dying. This opens the door wide for future challenges to any criteria. Furthermore, it's removing the 10-day waiting period. I met with Angela, who is one of my constituents. She's in a group of about 300 families that support each other in British Columbia, and they have children with disabilities. This group that she's with is upset about the bill and the assisted suicide door that it opens for people with disabilities. They feel that a statement is being made in this legislation that disabled people don't have a life worth living like other normal people. It's simply a matter of time, Mr. Speaker, before mental anguish becomes a sufficient reason. Why would the barriers and the timelines be reduced and removed? We're seeing that right now happening. How many people have gone through great mental anguish and depression, mental illness, that have led to them choosing suicide? I think of a Filipino nanny years ago. She was absolutely distraught. Why? She was a wonderful person. What had happened? She had a fender bender with her boss's vehicle. What did she do? She committed suicide. And I'm very concerned about, perhaps not this direction, but in the direction that it is going. And I think of even myself and challenges that I had years ago with in my early 20s of facing just a very dark period and a very painful period and suicidal thoughts going right there. It almost seemed very appealing in some ways. I never attempted, but I understood that. And I came through that time through the help of doctor, of my faith, and of a woman who later became my wife, Marlene. And so I feel that as a society just to come around, and so that to come around to bring those supports, I think that's essential, Mr. Speaker, and to look at this and other ways to support people going through these challenges and give them strength. And I haven't had the opportunity here to talk about palliative care. I will maybe in the questions, and just allow the members here to ask a few questions now.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the very personal comments of my friend across the way. I'm just wondering, though, with statistically that 7,000 Canadians, I believe that's roughly the number, have chosen assisted dying, whether he is completely against the notion or does see some value in continuing to try to perfect the legislation. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank the member for his question. And the figures, I believe, to the end of September are 16,000 have chosen assisted suicide. So it's right now it is legislation. It has gone through a Supreme Court. I'm disturbed that the Liberal government chose not to appeal the decision of the lower court to bring more amendments and changes. I think that that's very important. And again, I just mentioned as far as the second part to the story about Linda that really spoke to me is just her clarity of thought. I asked her very briefly, Mr. Speaker, what is your level of pain? She says, I have no pain, and she had absolutely no pain. She had clear thinking, she had energy, but even though she was dead and could not move or just dying, that's it. And she said that palliative care, you can deal with total pain and mental anguish, and that, Mr. Speaker, is where our focus needs to be, and it is not available to most Canadians.
Question commentaire. Questions and comments. La députée de Beauport-Limoilou.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague. His speech was very personal. And I think we can agree on the point where we both believe we need to improve care and assistance to people living with disabilities. That is extremely important and often underestimated. But we see with this bill that someone living with a disability who's suffering extreme pain, someone who has their full mental faculties, I see that there's a 90-day period in the legislation. If the date of their death isn't reasonably foreseeable, 90 days to enable the person to receive mental health support, care, to ensure that their desire to end their life is not actually a suicide wish. It's simply because of their pain. What does my colleague think of the 90-day delay?
Maple Ridge.
Je remercie le
I'd like to thank the honourable member for her question.
Une chose, c'est que
Well, I'd say that 90 days is not enough. Because there's often a lengthy waiting time to see a counselor in order to get the necessary assistance. I believe that 90 days is simply not enough. I think our message as a society should be, we are there to help you no matter what your situation, whether you have a disability or regardless of the situation, you can contribute to our society and our country. Thank you.
The honourable member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for his passionate speech, but also for sharing vulnerabilities of past life experience. I think that we can't forget that these are real people we're talking about. In my past line of work, I had the opportunity and was blessed to work with palliative care patients in a hospital setting and realized and experienced how healing with reconciliation amongst broken families that process can be, even though it's very sad. I'm just wondering if the member could elaborate a little bit on palliative care and the importance of that and hospice care. Thank you.
Well, member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Yeah, and I just want to recognize those that are the medical profession and volunteers in palliative care and in hospices. They make such a difference in the lives and the families of others. And that's something that I feel needs to be there. It concerns me that MAID is in the Health Care Act, which guarantees public funding and access for all. And yet, palliative care is not available. It's only available to about a third of the population of Canada. I think that's very disturbing. And I talked with a doctor, a palliative doctor, that said to me, you know, we can control totally as far as the level of pain and even the mental anguish. If they're anxious, totally under control. And I think people need to do that. I think a lot of people are afraid of the pain and the suffering that goes with it. That can be totally under control under palliative care. Thank you.
Resuming debate.